A 21-year-old woman is admitted into a hospital. Her father, an admiral, spent everything he had to get her there. The best doctors, the best equipment, and every single night, without fail, she screamed. The moment her head touched the pillow, she screamed. Doctors ran every test. MRIs, blood panels. Everything came back normal. They told her father it was grief. They told him it was stress. They told him his daughter's pain was not real. But one quiet nurse working part-time on this floor, she saw something. Something no one else had bothered to look for. And one night, when the corridor was silent and no one was watching, she did something no one else dared to do. She picked up that pillow, and she cut it open. What was inside, what had been pressed against the Admiral's daughter every single night, will make you sick. Stay, because this story is about to get very dark. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. There are lives that change quietly. No single moment. No dramatic event that you can point to and say, there. That is where it all fell apart. For Aubrey Perkins, it didn't fall apart. It simply emptied out. Slowly. The way a room feels after someone who filled it is gone. Her mother was that person. The one who filled every room she walked into. The one whose laugh you heard before you even saw her. The one who remembered the small things. The way Aubrey liked her coffee. The song she played every Sunday morning. The birthday card tradition they had kept alive since Aubrey was 7 years old. Every year, without fail, a card. Not a store-bought one. A handwritten one. Because that was their thing. That was theirs. 2 years ago, her mother died. And Aubrey was left in an apartment that had once felt like home, surrounded by photographs on the shelf that smiled at her from a life that no longer existed. She would sit in the quiet of that apartment and feel the absence of her mother like a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, settling into her bones, refusing to lift. The grief didn't come the way people expected it to. It didn't come as tears, not at first. It came as pain. A migraine, sharp, blinding, sudden. That arrived one night without warning and stole every ounce of sleep she had. She woke the next morning feeling as though someone had reached inside her head and twisted. And then it happened again. And again. Night after night, the pain came back. Relentless. Unforgiving. She tried therapy. She sat in quiet offices with kind people who asked her gentle questions, and she answered them as honestly as she could, and she left feeling only slightly less hollow than when she walked in. She tried medication. Pills that were supposed to dull the edges, calm the storm, give her body permission to rest. Some nights, they helped a little. Most nights, they didn't help at all. Nothing fully worked. And the nights kept coming. There was a birthday card on the kitchen table. A blank one. She had picked it up one evening, weeks after her mother passed, and sat down with a pen in her hand. She had started to write. Just a few words. The beginning of something she couldn't finish. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because saying it meant accepting something she wasn't ready to accept. So the card stayed there. Open. Unfinished. On the kitchen table, next to a cup of cold coffee and a window that looked out onto a city that kept moving without her. And Aubrey sat with the weight of it all. The grief, the pain, the exhaustion, the quiet, terrible feeling of being a person who is still here, but no longer quite whole. She was 21 years old. And she was drowning. Not in water. In something slower. Something quieter. Something that no one around her could see, and that no amount of scans or tests or well-meaning advice could reach. She was a daughter. She was grieving. And she was in pain that no one could explain. And for a while, for longer than anyone should have let it go, no one even tried hard enough to understand why. Admiral John Perkins is not a man who is easy to read. He has spent the better part of his life making sure of that. In the Navy, in command rooms, in rooms full of people who were watching him for any sign of weakness, he gave them nothing. He learned early that a leader who shows too much is a leader who loses the room. So he kept everything close, tucked it down, locked it away, and for decades, that worked. But there are things that no amount of discipline can contain. He was alone in his home one evening. The house was quiet in a way that felt different from peace. It felt like absence, like a space that used to be filled with something and now was simply empty. He sat in a chair, the same chair he had sat in for years, and he reached for his phone. Not to make a call. Not yet. He opened his voicemails. And he found one from Aubrey. It was nothing. That was the point. It was just her voice, casual, easy, laughing about something small. Something so ordinary it didn't even matter what it was. Maybe she was telling him about something funny that happened at the grocery store. Maybe she was just calling to say hello. The kind of message a daughter leaves for her father on a Tuesday afternoon without thinking twice about it. The kind of message you listen to once, smile, and forget about by dinner. He listened to it twice. And then he sat there, in the silence that came after. And the silence said everything his face would not. John Perkins had commanded fleets. He had made decisions under pressure that most people would never be asked to make in their entire lives. He had faced down danger, real danger, and in every single one of those moments, his body knew what to do. His mind was sharp. His hands were steady. He did not flinch. Not once. Not ever. That was who he was. That was the man the world knew. But watching his daughter suffer was doing something to him that no enemy ever could. Because this was not a battle he could fight. This was not a problem he could command his way out of. There were no orders to give. No strategy to execute. No chain of command that led to an answer. His daughter was in pain. Real, relentless, undeniable pain. And every doctor she had seen, every test that had been run, every well-meaning person who had tried to help had come back with the same empty words. We don't know. We can't find anything. It might just be stress. And Admiral John Perkins, a man who had never once in his life felt truly helpless, was helpless. So he did the only thing he knew how to do when the problem in front of him was bigger than the tools he had. He made a call. He used every connection, every resource, every ounce of pull he had built over a lifetime of service. And he got his daughter admitted into a hospital, a real hospital, a place with the best doctors, the best equipment, the best chance of finally finding the answer that everyone else had failed to find. He believed that if anyone in this world had the answers, if anyone could finally make the pain stop, it would be a place built for exactly that. So he brought her there. And when he walked through that doorway, into the hospital, into the fluorescent light, into the hum of machines and the quiet footsteps of nurses on linoleum, he carried with him something heavier than rank. He carried the quiet, desperate hope of a father who was running out of options, and the stubborn, unshakable refusal to stop looking for one. When Aubrey first arrived at the hospital, the room felt like something close to hope. It was bright, clean, the kind of place that carries a quiet promise, that somewhere inside these walls, someone has the answer. The beds are made with care. The light comes in soft through the window. There are machines that hum with purpose, nurses who move with intention, doctors with degrees on their walls and years of training behind their hands. It was, by every measure, a place built to heal. And for a little while, during the day, when the sunlight was still touching the floor and the corridor outside was full of footsteps and quiet conversation, Aubrey almost looked peaceful, almost looked like someone who might actually be okay. The nights were different. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a hospital after dark. It is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of waiting. The overhead lights dim. The footsteps thin out. The hum of the machines becomes the loudest thing in the room. And the darkness, the real darkness, begins to creep in around the edges of everything. It is in that darkness, in that quiet, that Aubrey would lay her head down on the pillow. And the pain would come. Not slowly. Not gently. It arrived like something violent. A sharp, white-hot force that tore through her the moment her head made contact. And she screamed. Not a whimper. Not a cry. Not the kind of sound that could be dismissed or explained away. A scream. The kind that cuts through walls. The kind that wakes you up even if you were already awake. The kind that tells everyone within earshot that something is very, very wrong. And the hospital reacted the way hospitals do. Nurses rushed in. Doctors were paged. Someone ordered more tests. Blood panels were drawn, again. Neurological exams were conducted, again. Scans were taken, again. And the results came back exactly the way they had come back every single time before. Clean. Normal. Nothing wrong. Nothing there. Nothing to explain the pain that was tearing through a 21-year-old girl every single night, without fail. So the doctors did what doctors do when the tests tell them there is nothing to find. They looked at each other across the room with that particular expression, the one that is not quite concern and not quite frustration, but something in between. And they began to explain. It could be stress, they said. It could be grief. It could be the trauma of losing her mother, still living inside her body, manifesting in ways that the scans simply could not capture. They used words that sounded reasonable. They used phrases that sounded compassionate. And then, one by one, they left the room. The door closed, and Aubrey was alone. The room was the same room it had been an hour ago. The same bed, the same machines, the same pillow beneath her head. But it felt entirely different now. It felt like a place where no one was going to come back. A place where the answers had already been given, even though they weren't answers at all. They were guesses. They were explanations offered by people who had already decided the problem was not worth looking harder for. She laid her head back down, because what else was there to do? And the pain came again, and she screamed again. And this time, the corridor outside stayed quiet. No one rushed in. No one was paged. Because in the minds of the people who ran that floor, the case had already been reviewed. The tests had already been run. The conclusion had already been reached. Aubrey Perkins was in pain, and no one had an answer. And not a single person on that floor stayed long enough to ask why. Not every person who enters a room changes it. Some people move through spaces the way water moves through a pipe. Functional, purposeful, unremarkable. They do what needs to be done. They do it well. And they move on to the next thing. There is nothing wrong with that. Hospitals run on people like that. The system needs them. But every now and then. Not often, not on any schedule, not in any way that can be predicted or manufactured. There is someone who moves through a room differently. Someone who slows down where everyone else speeds up. Someone who notices the thing that everyone else walks right past. Angela Mark was 28 years old. She was new to the night shift on this floor. New enough that most of the other nurses hadn't quite learned her rhythm yet. She was quiet. Not shy, not distant, but quiet in the way that certain people are quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from paying close attention to the world around you. The kind of quiet that, if you were paying attention yourself, you might notice was doing something the loudness of everyone else was not. She moved through the corridor that first night the way she moved through every corridor. Slowly, carefully, checking on each patient not with the brisk efficiency of someone running behind schedule, but with a kind of unhurried attention that felt almost out of place in a hospital at night. She was present. She was there, in each doorway, in a way that the other nurses, who had too many patients and too little time and too many hours already on their feet, simply could not afford to be. And then she stopped outside Aubrey's door. She didn't walk past it. She didn't glance in and keep moving. She stood there, and she listened. From somewhere inside the room, she could hear the quiet breathing of a girl who was not sleeping. The kind of breathing that belongs to someone who is awake and exhausted and dreading what comes next. Angela listened for a moment, and then she stepped inside. Aubrey was sitting up in bed, not because she wanted to be, because laying down had become something she was afraid of. Her eyes were red. Her face was tired in a way that went deeper than one bad night. This was the face of someone who had been suffering for a long time and had stopped expecting anyone to do anything about it. Angela looked at her, and she did not ask a dozen questions. She did not pull up a chart and start reading through test results. She did not offer an explanation or a suggestion or a reassurance. She simply sat down, in the chair beside the bed, and she stayed. And that, for Aubrey, was enough. For now. Over the nights that followed, Angela kept coming back. Not because the schedule required her to. Not because someone told her to pay special attention to this patient. But because something had caught in her mind. Something small, something quiet, and she couldn't let it go. So she watched. She watched the way someone watches when they are not looking for anything in particular, but somehow know that the answer is there, hiding in plain sight, if they just stay still long enough to see it. She noticed that Aubrey cried when she laid down. She noticed that Aubrey was fine when she sat up, fine when she stood, fine when she walked. The pain did not come when Aubrey was moving. It did not come when she was upright. It came only, when she laid her head down on the pillow. Angela wrote this down, not on an official chart, in her own small notebook. The kind of notebook a person carries when they are thinking about something they cannot yet put into words, but refuse to let slip away. She wrote it down. She underlined it. And she stared at what she had written for a long time. She saw something no one else on that floor had bothered to look for. And the next night, she was going to act on it. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. You do not always recognize them when they arrive. Sometimes they come quietly. Sometimes they come in the middle of an ordinary night, in an ordinary room, when no one is watching and nothing about the world looks like it is about to change. But it is, and it does. The corridor was silent. The kind of silence that only exists in a hospital after midnight. Thick, heavy, undisturbed. Angela Mark walked into Aubrey's room the way she had walked in every night before this one. Quietly, carefully, without making more noise than was necessary. Aubrey was lying in bed, her eyes half closed, her body still, trying to do the thing her body had not been able to do for weeks. Trying to sleep, or at least trying to pretend that sleep was something that might still come to her tonight. Angela stood there for a moment. She looked at Aubrey. She looked at the bed. And then her eyes moved to the pillow. She had been thinking about this. For days, she had been thinking about it. The pattern in her notebook. The way the pain always came at the same moment. The moment Aubrey laid down. The way it never came at any other time. Angela had turned this over in her mind again and again. The way you turn a stone over in your hand when something about its weight doesn't feel right. And tonight, she had decided. Tonight, she was going to find out. She reached for the pillow. She picked it up. And the first thing she felt, the very first thing, before anything else registered, was that it was wrong. Not soft the way a pillow should be soft. Not light the way a pillow should be light. It was heavy, stiff, dense in a way that felt unnatural, like something had been packed inside it that did not belong there. Her heart began to thud, quietly at first, a slow, steady beat that she could feel in her chest, behind her ribs, in the space between her lungs. But her hands stayed steady. Her hands stayed perfectly, deliberately steady. Because Angela Mark was not a woman who backed away from the thing that needed to be done. She reached for the scissors. They were small. The kind kept at the nurse's station for cutting tape, for trimming bandages, for the 100 small tasks that fill a night shift. She held them in her hand. And she looked at the pillow. And for a moment, just one moment, the room was completely, utterly still. As though the air itself was holding its breath. Waiting. She placed the scissors along the seam of the pillow. And she began to cut. The fabric parted slowly, inch by inch, the thread giving way under the pressure of the blade. And as it opened, as the inside of the pillow began to reveal itself, Angela's hands did not shake. Her breath did not catch. Not yet. Not until she saw what was there, buried in the foam, hidden beneath the surface, invisible to anyone who had not thought to look. Nails. Dozens of them. Rusted. Old. Their tips angled upward, sharp, deliberate, precise, buried deep inside the foam in a way that was not accidental. Could not have been accidental. Every single one of them positioned to do exactly one thing. To cause pain. To cause pain in a way that left no wound. No blood. No mark. No evidence. No proof that anything had happened at all except for the scream of a girl in the dark who no one believed. They spilled out across the white hospital sheet. One by one, and then all at once. The sound of metal against fabric, small, cold, quiet, was the only sound in the room. Angela did not scream. She did not move. She did not step back or cover her mouth or make any of the sounds that a person makes when the world shifts beneath them. She simply stood there, and she stared at what was in front of her, at what had been inside that pillow, at what had been pressed against Aubrey's head every single night, at the proof, finally, undeniably, impossibly, of what someone had done to this girl. Someone did this on purpose. Someone looked at a 21-year-old grieving girl and made a choice. A quiet, calculated, deliberate choice to make her suffer. And for weeks, no one had seen it. No one had looked. No one had thought to ask why a pillow might feel wrong. Angela looked down at the nails one more time. And then, slowly, she reached for her phone. Angela Mark did not panic. That was the first thing anyone would notice about her in the moments that followed. And it mattered more than people understood. Because panic, in a moment like that, is contagious. It spreads through a room the way fire spreads through dry wood. One person loses their composure, and the whole room loses its shape. Angela did not let that happen. She stood beside that bed, beside those nails scattered across the white sheet, and she did what needed to be done. Calmly, precisely, the way someone does something when they understand that the next few minutes are going to matter for a very long time. She picked up her phone. She photographed the nails, every single one of them, from every angle,